Hey, Rob, how are you? Thank you for joining us today with 100 Designers Say. And we know that you are a transportation designer. And I've got some questions here that the students and the teachers and designers are really keen to find out. So, how about we begin by you giving us a little introduction about your job, about who you are?
Sure, thanks. My name's Rob.V, and so I'm the founder and managing director of Delineate. It's my own company that I started around 15 years ago after, I guess, a similar amount of time in working in mostly car design studios. Originally studied mechanical engineering, but I've never worked as an engineer. I've worked primarily in automotive and other transportation design studios. And at the moment, I live in far north Queensland.
Cool. Thank you, Rob. Shall we maybe then begin this journey by talking about a little bit about your education? Like, have you been interested in design since early young age, or did you pick it up along the way?
Yeah, so I mean, I grew up as a car guy. You know, my dad was always into cars, and so I was always that way as well. I honestly went through high school not really knowing what I wanted to do, and in a lot of ways was lucky to come across a traineeship at Holden. And so when I went in there for this interview, I didn't really know very much about the role that I was applying for. I didn't even know that there was jobs for people to do these kind of things. And so it was a real eye opener for me. And so originally, after not really being too sure about the place that I interviewed at, I became really enthusiastic and luckily got through the interview process and the assessment process and was one of 12 people selected to do an automotive drafting traineeship. So
Yes.
that went for 2 years. I studied. I worked for 3 days a week. This is straight after high school, and I studied for 2 days a week. And then after that was when most of the other team members went into an engineering type role. I went and worked in the design studio at Holden. Um,
Uh-huh.
Interesting
Sorry, when
times
when
then,
you
where there
say
was.
sorry, when you say you were selected as one of the 12 students, did that happen during your high school? Like, did they come to the school and actually did a bit of assessment and then they picked 12 or?
No, it was an application process. So there was a lot of applicants from all over Australia, and we had to submit a written application and attend an aptitude test. And the first sort of I can't remember the number, but a certain number of people got selected for interviews, and then 12 people were selected. And the idea always was that. They would then be sent off after the traineeship into one of the specific groups. So whether it was mechanical engineering or engine group or body engineering or the design studio, which is where I ended up. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Rob, for sharing the education period of your life. So the next question is something related about your early career, so about where you started, and also what did you do between where you first started as a young designer and up until now you have your own design business. Like, what kind of journey have you gone through all these years?
Sure. So I think when I started, when I finished my traineeship and went to work in the design studio, it was quite an awesome experience for a young car guy. We were working on futuristic stuff that was sometimes 5-6 years away, and really exciting. And I thought it was fantastic. I actually got there at a really interesting time though, because all my training had been on manual drafting, so drafting tables and pens and old-fashioned stuff. I went into the
Yeah.
studio and a lot of stuff was done by hand, so clay modelling, that sort of thing. And not too long after I started in there, they undertook an experiment to actually start using these digital design tools. So they were originally tools that had originated in the movie industry. And so, the experience, the idea was to try to implement some of these digital design tools. I was quite young and enthusiastic, and there were a lot of people around me with way more experience than me. And I think I benefited because those experienced people were perhaps a little more reluctant to jump into this new technology than what I was. So I think definitely right place at the right time. I learned this software, right at the beginning. I got to see what worked and what didn't work. A lot of experience with creating 3D models, seeing that then milled out into clay with a milling
Yeah.
machine.
Yeah.
Even into virtual reality and visualization and things like that when I started my career didn't even exist. So really it's really
Yeah.
been good for me to kind of be at the forefront of this, and I've really kind of always had this interest in technology, and watched all of this come along, and 3D printing and 3D laser scanning and all of this sort of stuff has always been something I'm interested in and try to jump into before everyone else does.
Mm-hmm. Well, do you remember what
Um,
was the first technology or software that you used in your career? Like many years ago, what was the first one that you started? Do you remember
yeah,
that?
so I started very much on an engineering CAD software, which was horrendously difficult to use and kind of boring. And so to give you an idea, I did a windscreen for one of the early Commodores, and it took around about 6 weeks to do that windscreen
Oh,
in a
wow.
very simple thing like that. So, I mean, it's probably something you could do in about 10 minutes now. But just back then, the software was very clunky, very old fashioned. But I guess that really took off when we moved into this Alias software, which is the software that's still used in
Mm.
most automotive studios today. It's still a software that I use as my primary tool. And I think what was interesting about the timing was I used this software for around about 3 years at GM, like towards the end of my time there.
Mm-hmm.
Was lucky enough to be able to go to Germany and work in the GM studio over there for a while, partly because I knew this software, and this was a time when all of the automotive studios around the world were starting to go this way, wanting to go there very very quickly and rapidly, and so I was able to. I got an offer to go to work for Saab in Sweden, and fair to say it was an offer I couldn't refuse. And again, working on future product stuff, but also being a mentor to other people who were learning this software and um, teaching them about the mistakes that I'd made and things that worked, things
Yeah.
that didn't work, and that sort of thing. Because I think, again, I'm showing my age, but back then we didn't have much in the way of the internet. There wasn't a lot of online resources for learning this stuff. It was very much trial and error, and you try something, it didn't work, so you don't try that again. And then after you've made enough mistakes, then you kind of know what doesn't work and what does work, and so that's what you come to. So I spent several years in Europe. I worked for Saab, for Opel in Germany, which is the time was GM owned. I worked for Renault in Paris, and Renault was exciting for me because they were considered the world leaders in doing this as well. So that was one of the reasons I wanted to go there, was that these were the people that were. This was the company that was stretching the boundaries of using this technology more than anybody else, and so I wanted to kind of go there and measure myself against that standard and see how I went. Um, I consulted to a lot of different companies. I came back to Australia for a while. I worked for BMW in Germany for a while. Worked for Volkswagen Audi in the US for a little while, and got to travel around a fair bit. And about 15 years ago, while I was doing a lot of freelance after hours work, decided that I would branch out and start my own company. I didn't have very big ambitions. I was more, I'm going to work on my own as a freelancer. And pretty soon that grew into there being a lot of demand for what we were doing. And so it ended up growing quite rapidly. And I think what was interesting also is that a lot of my customers were the ones that employed the experienced people. And so I couldn't then go out there and hire experienced people because I would be taking them from my customers, which would have been problematic. And so I was kind of forced in a lot of ways to hire a lot of graduates. And so I spent, had quite a lot of young, inexperienced people. And,
Hmm.
it initially wasn't my preference, but I really kind of came to really like that approach, and a lot of new ideas coming in, a lot of willingness to learn, which perhaps more experienced people didn't have. And so, yeah, so I built my company primarily with industrial designers, and at the time, primarily from the one transportation design school that was in Melbourne.
Okay, cool. I mean, so the young people that you've mentored or you've kind of nurtured in your company or maybe in like I know because I know you were a mentor at MIT University for a couple of years. Are you still doing that now or?
Yeah, I am. So I'm kind of quite proud of the fact that some of the graduates that I'd hired in my company have gone on to be pretty high up in companies like Ford and Toyota, design
Mhm.
manager or senior design manager kind of roles. And I always kind
Yeah,
of enjoyed that. I knew when I hired them that they would move on at some point, and so like I said,
yeah.
I've enjoyed watching them grow and move into other roles. Um, Sort of about probably 4 or 5 years ago, took on an RMIT mentoring role. So I make myself available on a portal to people who are interested in the kind of skills that are listed on my profile, and so people then reach
Yeah.
out to me, and we do a process where we work together for a couple of months. I help them with advice on preparing portfolios, how to what kind of jobs what kind of companies they should target, what kind of skills they
Uh-huh.
needed to improve, and those sort of things. And I also have done this unofficially with the Academy of Art in San Francisco. So one of my
Yeah.
great design heroes who runs the transportation design course there, who I met quite a long time ago and was kind of a bit starstruck by. He asked me if I would help some of his students with the digital modeling, 3D visualization kind of things that
Hmm.
he wasn't as familiar with. And so that's been a really rewarding experience. I've been able to, again, help a lot of students, and quite a lot of them are working in the industry now as well. And so it's very rewarding to do that.
Yeah, wow, that's amazing. That it's like you created your own community, like this community. You've got young people and you help them to become like great, good designers, and they kind of branch out into like all corners of the world. So you still, contact them, and you guys form this like a really big community there.
Yeah, well, I think that particularly the transportation design world is quite small, and
Yeah.
some of the people my company works for now are the same people I worked with 20 plus years ago. But certainly there is this kind of small community, and like I said, I think perhaps when I was younger, it felt like I didn't necessarily have as many mentors and as many people to draw on as what I would have liked at the time. And so I try to make that process easier if I can for other people who are sort of in that process themselves, because
Yeah.
it is very very difficult, particularly I think in the transportation design, to get a start and to get an opportunity and to understand what the right thing to do is.
Yeah, it is a very specific and unique sub industry, I guess. The next question is something to do with your current job. We know that you have your own transportation design company. Can you tell us a little bit about the scope of the work that you guys do, and then roughly how big is the team? What's the responsibility of the members, and also maybe share with us a couple of the highlight project that you've achieved, I guess.
Sure. So yeah, I think we're capable. The company's capable of doing the whole design process. So this would be through ideation through to CAD modeling, prototyping, and things like that. I
Hmm.
think in reality we do a much smaller amount than that. So we're involved primarily in the 3D modeling visualization part of it, and then also using the same 3D technology then to do things like educational, virtual reality and marketing content. So if you pick up a brochure for a car now and you see a photograph in there, it's all computer generated, and
Hmm.
things like product
Right.
configurators where you can change colours and things like that. So it's really when I started the business, I was very much focused on doing what I'd been doing in those car design studios, and I think what we've been able to do is apply this technology to multiple other areas that originally I hadn't even thought of before. And so we still try to do that. We still try to find what our expertise is and where potentially we could apply that to new projects or new industries. In terms of highlight projects, I think there's in the last few years there's been a couple. The opportunity to work on the Tesla Model X, Google's self-driving car. Personally, though, having grown up in Melbourne, I'm always have an affinity for the local projects and the projects which have an Australian connection to them. So when I think of that, I'm thinking of Holden Monaro, the Melbourne Tram, the Talus Hawkeye military vehicle, and the Nissan V8 supercar would be all kind of things which I really felt good about because of the Australian connection and more specifically even the Melbourne connection. So.
Yeah. So, for example, in the Melbourne train design, like, what is your kind of your role in that big project? Because I kind of assume that there's will be a very big team and everyone is doing a little bit of different things. So, what is exactly did you do for that, for example?
Yeah, so absolutely. So we've worked on the Melbourne tram, which is about to be upgraded, but the current one that's out there, and also the new V line train, which just came out last year. We do all the visual 3D modelling for that, if you like. So customer has a very strong engineering team. They have human factors and materials experts and crash experts and all of those sort of different things that do all of that. And often we start with a very simple sketch and we combine that with all of these different engineering criteria, the crash requirements, the obvious things that go with trains and trams for track requirements and clearance to different objects. We incorporate all of that and we come up with a 3D model, which for want of a better word, is beautiful, but also feasible. So that's kind of where, in some ways, the centre between an industrial designer and an engineer to make
Yeah.
something which looks visually appealing, but is also feasible from a manufacturing cost and strength point of view.
Yeah, it sounds to me that in order to do what you guys are doing, you kind of need to know a lot about like everything. So you need to learn about like engineering part of it. You need to learn about like say the cost, the budgeting part of it. You need to learn about the visual, obviously the visual and the 3D modeling part of it. You may even need to consider some many other factors. So it sounds to me that there's no one like there's no like a like there's no like a simple description about what you guys do. It's more like you have to kind of pick up and you have to work with other people. You have to pick up their skills and you have to understand when they're delivering their needs to you, and you have to incorporate that into your 3D modeling, for example. So as for example, if I was a design student now, if I'm about to graduate from university, and I'm interested in transportation or car or vehicle design, so what kind of skills should I prepare myself or equip myself with as early as possible, even like say in during university? How can I how can I make myself competitive to become someone like you who is kind of knows how to do these things?
Yeah, so I mean, it's definitely more collaborative than it used to be when I started my career. It was, making something look nice, and then you would like effectively throw it over the wall, and the engineers would have to make it work. And it's certainly not like that anymore. I think you deal with, in the job, you're dealing with, very closely with engineering people, with cost people, with branding people and marketing people, and all
Yeah.
of those sort of things. So I think to come up with real usable, feasible designs and not something which is like a fairy tale kind of thing. I think it's important to gain as much knowledge as possible in all of those things: materials, manufacturing processes, cost, prototyping, all of those kind of things, which helps you understand the needs of all of those other stakeholders. So you don't necessarily need to be an expert in this. You're probably, as an industrial designer, not going to be you might be, but you're probably not going to be selecting the material that it's manufactured in. But certainly having an understanding of that and how it's made, and maybe if it's plastic, how it comes out of a mold and things like that. Really crucial for making sure that you're coming up with designs which are feasible and brings the whole company forward, rather than just something that looks good but is impossible to make it work. So I think, to answer your question, you need to know a little bit of all of that. And certainly I've never worked as an engineer, but my engineering degree has been hugely helpful, and all of the knowledge that I learnt during that. And certainly I think there's so many resources out there now online and everything for understanding injection molding and materials and FEA and all of these different things that you don't need to know how to do it. You just need to understand it, and you need to understand what the requirements of all of those things are. And I think because it's impossible to be an expert in everything when you're learning, you probably need to aim to have some knowledge of all of it, and then to pick two or three things, maybe one or two things that you think you're really good at and that you really like doing and that really energize you, and become really good at those things and try to stand out in those things, but certainly not neglect the other things as well.
Yeah, I think it sounds to me that if I were to learn all these skills, even just a little bit of everything, one way of doing that is to get it online, and because there's heaps tons of YouTube videos or courses that you can buy or you can get for free, or maybe get yourself an intern like in a company like yours, where you got someone like you to mentor the day-to-day base you know the daily base skills. That maybe there's two way of doing that. One is to you kind of self learn a little bit of everything, because I'm sure that because I graduated from MIT industrial design many years ago, and then but I know that people who are interested in transportation design, I don't think, or in my understanding, I might be wrong, but I don't think the course actually provided them with more than a couple of what you've described just now. I think maybe graduates, they just have to spend a lot more like after school hours just to actually learn, like self learn that themselves, or maybe get themselves into an internship into some local company so they can actually learn from that. I think that there may be some other ways to do it, but I think it's really important for the students to understand that having a university degree is not going to make you competitive at all. It's like you have to be cautious about all the other little things. You have to recognize the importance of learning those things as soon as possible, even before you start finding a job. Because I feel like the market is getting a bit more competitive, and then you have to kind of start that as early as possible. It almost sounds like.
Yeah, that's definitely the case. I mean, it is and always has been in my career. It's always been a competitive market. I think the risk also is that some of particularly the bigger companies, look at the new graduates each year, and so if you haven't got a job in that first year, sometimes they may be looking at the next year's graduates and stuff. But I think just do everything you can
Yeah.
to put
And
yourself in that position, whereas when someone does give you a look, that you've got the right skills and are able to answer the right questions. And I think I think the learning mindset is also important too. Like I go when it's on in Melbourne or Sydney, I go to the National Manufacturing Week, which is a particular expo where you get to see all these machines and processes and everything. I'll never buy one, I'll never use one, but I learn about these kind of things. I go to different technology shows and things like that, and then also just they're just demonstrating to a potential employer that you want to go over and above.
oh
And I
yeah,
think I
yeah.
think if you work for a big car company, you might get to specialise and only do one thing, and sketch all day and not ever have to worry about this stuff. But the likely scenario is you're going to work for a company where they're going to expect you to know a little bit about all of this stuff. Yeah, I think the mentor was another good point as well. I mean, I certainly had them, at different points in my career to try and understand not just the software that I was using, but also, would partner up with some of the
Mm,
experienced clay modelers who really understood surface and form and 3D a lot better than I did. And so there's all sorts of aspects to this, and you kind of have to give a lot of it a go before you see what you're good at and what you enjoy doing as well. But I would say when I started doing this, I wasn't very good at it. I would say, I probably didn't necessarily have natural talent or anything. I just worked really hard at it and practiced a lot, and changed
yeah.
companies quite a bit, which gave me a lot of experience I wouldn't have got if I had stayed at one company, and the connections part of it as well. I mean, I run a company now that does very almost no marketing or sales because we're quite well connected. So that's an important part of it as well.
All right, thank you, Rob. So before we conclude, we've got one more question regarding to what kind of advice would you give, uh, like say school teachers or education, higher education institution, or their curriculum designers about what kind of content should we include in our curriculum, just to encourage more students, to allow to give more opportunity for students who are interested in this transportation design industry, and what would you what would you give them as advice in terms of in terms of building courses that will help the student to fulfill their passion, I guess.
Yeah, so I think the key one for me would be that to make sure that you maintain a connection with industry, because I think ultimately what you're trying to do here is put the students in a position where they're employable, and so understanding that the requirements of industry are what will make somebody employable or not. So I think maintaining that connection. I know at Academy of Art in San Francisco, they do a more than other organisations do a real strong connection between industrial design and user experience, and so that's the kind
Mm.
of thing where I think that's quite new and refreshing, but I think it's reflective of what is happening in industry and what's happening in the design process. So I think connect to industry is the other advantage in this is always going to help if students can see what they're aiming for as well. So if by watching maybe a video like this, somebody can go, okay, well, that's a bit more about that job, or this is what I'll be doing, or this is what I won't be doing. It gives you
Yeah.
something for the students to aim for and to kind of go, well, maybe to crystallize a little bit what they actually want to do, rather than having this sort of vague image of what maybe a car designer does or an industrial designer does.
Yeah, cool. It's definitely, I think it's definitely worth giving them at least more exposure to the actual like authentic industry. What does it look like? What do you guys what do you guys do on a daily basis, and where can you learn these resources from? Because at the moment, I mean, a lot of the students they probably still have this conception. They may have watched a couple of car design sketches YouTube video and think, oh, I have to be really good at sketching in order to be a car designer. But in fact, there's so many different things you can do. You can do model building, you can do engineering, you can do marketing. There's such a big industry where maybe a lot of the students, at least from the perspective of secondary school design teacher, at least I think a lot of them still have very limited idea about what this industry is about. Not to mention, where can it lead them? And but even at a university level, I think even for example, industrial design at MIT, some of us will choose to pick like a transportation car design as their final project. But even at that stage, maybe if there's no enough industry connection, that's probably still going to kind of like that's still going to hinder their, I think, the opportunities of actually getting into the industry. Because I know there's a lot of furniture companies or maybe just general industrial design company. They may have a lot of advertisement online. They come to school and introduce their companies. it's easier to get to know those people, to get to know those owners or business leaders, but it seems to be a bit more rare of a opportunity to actually meet those leaders and meet those expertise from the car industry. I guess that's just my perspective, though, because
Yeah,
when you were
I think
yeah, sorry, keep going. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I think it's maybe easier than you think as well. I think my
Oh,
experience
okay.
and the people I work with would be happy to help. There's obviously I know RMIT has quite a big alumni group that is prepared to help as well. But I think people like me who have been through all of these experiences, I think in general are pretty open to helping and mentoring and that sort of thing. So I think if you want to find a mentor or you want to find somebody to ask questions of, just ask. You'll be surprised maybe.
Yeah, yeah, oh, that's great. That if this misconception of mine is like kind of wrong, because I kind of just assume it on the base of this might be more specific, a smaller kind of field than, say, for example, in general, furniture design, or or UI design. It just sounds to me, from like a pure customer point of view, it sounds to me to be a little bit smaller. But if there is like
It's, no,
a
it's
reach,
definitely not. Just to be clear, it's
yeah,
definitely a smaller field. It's just I'm talking about the mentoring part of it and asking for advice from
yeah.
people. You'll definitely find that there's plenty of people who will help.
Yeah, that's great. It's good to hear that. Great. Okay. So students designers who are watching this video, please get onto websites like MIT mentoring program, and check out those opportunities and have a conversation. Maybe one of those conversations will inspire you and open a new gate for you, open a new window for you. That's great. Cool. All right. Oh, thank you so much, Rob, for sharing all these insights with us. So, before we conclude, is there anything, any other advice or any other comment you want to make, or any little tips that you want to give us?
I think just I would say it's been a fantastic career for me to be involved in. It's a great to be involved in design. It's fun. It's futuristic. It's interesting. It's hard work sometimes, but it's a great career. I've worked in about 10 different countries, and it's given me opportunities that I probably never thought that I would do. So I encourage everyone who's interested in this field to have a go at it. Work hard, make yourself stand out, and like we've already said, is try to learn as many different skills as you can, and find a mentor and reach out to those people, and including me, if you'd like to find me, through the Delineate website or through LinkedIn. I can't always guarantee I'll answer you straight away, but I'll try.
Yeah, well, thank you, Rob, for encouraging that. I mean, people who are watching this video, please, if you have any questions, I'm sure Rob will be more than happy to have a chat with you. Also, I think, um, so your profile it's at the moment still on the MIT mentoring program, isn't it? So they can still find you through that, right?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. Fantastic. Thank you for your sharing, and thank you for your time, Robert. It's a pleasure to have this meeting with you, and I wish you all the best to you and your company and your future business. Thank you for joining us today.
No worries. Thank you.